Chapter 1.
You can get very lonely in a university, even one with a few thousand students. Sometimes it seems that the entire movement of all those people is in the opposite direction to you. And then there's the third week blues, when most drop out, and the lecture halls start to look a bit sparse. And when being the only person sat in a row begins to be the norm. At Sexton University, with its semi-regular alien invasions, occult massacres and Kraken attacks, student numbers have all sorts of reasons for being low. My first roommate, Ollie, had graduated early, but happy endings are rare at SexU, and the next two had met rather more sinister ends. That was how I ended up with a reputation as something as a Jonah. My peers pressed themselves to the far walls if they passed me in the corridor, avoided eye contact, or made religious signs with their fingers. The only exception was Alex, my new roommate, who initially seemed perfect because he shunned everybody anyway. Unfortunately, the low point of the week followed soon after he moved in. I was returning from a lecture during which not a single person had said a single word my way, though some had muttered a few about me. And one had whispered what sounded suspiciously like a warding spell. But when I got back to the dorm, I found Alex making out with Lisa Seafried, who I'm sure you remember is best friends with known Trump, boyfriend stealer, and my sworn enemy. Ugh, Betty Bramble. "Hi, Riley," she smarmed, just as soon as her tongue was free. "Hi," I said, lamenting the lost art of solving your problems with a cutlass. "We'll be out of your hair soon enough. We're going to Aloysius in town. Have you been?" This to the casual observer may have seemed like friendly chit-chat, especially if you're a boy and not used to listening to girls. But it was a calculated insult. She proved as much when I indicated I had not been to Aloysius, and she went on, "Well, it's very exclusive. But Lily Bet Daddy knows John the manager and got us in. You remember Lily Bet, don't you?" she asked. She was as phony as a Sunday market Chanel. But I did remember, and so did my memory foam mattress, but I merely nodded. "She always asks about you, doesn't she, Bay?" Alex, always a communicator, replied, "Huh?" I said, and she had, that Lily Bet's always asking after Riley.
"Yeah,"
he said, with FIFA no doubt occupying his mind. "I'm dying to try the truffles, aren't you, Bay?"
"Yeah,"
he said again. "You should come with us," she continued in my direction. "We can get an extra chair pulled up, and Bet would love to see you again." I bet she would, especially in a high chair at the end of the table, and eating the only thing on the menu I could afford, the coffee stains. "I have an assignment to work on," which was a convincing excuse to everyone bar my lecturers, who seemed to have a sixth sense for how much work I put into my studies. "Oh, shame. If there are any leftovers, I'll make sure there's a doggy bag with your name on it." And if you thought it was all in my mind, that was your proof of her cold, calculating evil. And she's only half as bad as Betty herself, who can deduct 30/60 from your boyfriend's resolve and tell you exactly what it amounts to. I left the two of them cooing at each other like wood pigeons and set off to find a less rural environment.
Chapter 2. 2? There's a sequel? Nobody said there was a sequel.
Since the tragic demise of my half-dozen or so predecessors, I had taken upon myself most of the duties of Professor Lovecraft's TA. This was primarily because there were no official duties, and although I've been paid accordingly so far, I remained the optimist and sought him out. He was in his office making good use of a racamier, which could have passed for a miniature longboat were it not for the gaudy figurehead affixed to the prow. My initial slamming of the door failed to rouse him, so I tried again with more vigour.
"Is that you, Malcolm?"
he asked sleepily.
Did you bring my breakfast?
"This morning? It's only 2.
Oh.
he said, checking his watch, but he added nothing more. I joined him on the seat, with Neptune's shapely wooden angel at my back and my feet towards him. We sat in a silence punctuated only by my sighing in frustration, fidgeting, and hitting dust that had likely been there since Shakespeare's time, out of the furniture. Eventually I took to poking him with my toe in time to the size, and he snapped.
Is there something bothering you?
"Well, yes, there is. That Betty Bramble—"
Oh, I like her.
he interrupted.
Such a sweet kid.
Even after my glare cut him off, I stared long and hard so he'd realise the enormity of picking the wrong side in this war.
Go on.
He said sheepishly. She's going to a posh Italian's for dinner with all her friends.
I had dinner with Mark Antony once.
If only death glares were fatal, then he would understand the gravity of the situation. And I probably haven't had a date since he was alive, I mumbled piteously.
Well,
He said thoughtfully.
I think we should keep things professional.
I didn't mean with you. The very idea. Honestly, I'd talked to a statue of the university's founder for an hour during freshers and I'd still got more sense. After a few minutes of me saying it was okay and it didn't matter, he realised it was not okay and it did matter. Did I need to use a code or something? But even though I wasn't going to Aloysius, my thoughts turned to food. What's the best meal you've ever had? I asked.
Egg.
Don't you dare say eggs. You always have eggs.
I'm a man of simple, regularly indulged pleasures, Malcolm. However, when it comes to the culinary masters, there is only one man worth his 11 herbs and spices.
He could at last detect my incoming glares, so he said,
Aldran Goodbelcher.
You just made that up because I was glaring at you.
Not at all.
What did he cook?
That's hardly as important as understanding flavour profiles and the importance of commensality.
If I wanted to waste my time, I could work on my assignment. I think I'll go and talk to somebody else. I sighed. He took no offence at that, which was a shame because I'd intended quite a bit. As I stood up, he said,
Let me show you something. Grab that box.
The box in question was nearer him than me, but I was well used to doing all the work by now, so I picked it up and I offered it to him. It was a fairly standard shoebox, certainly not big enough to be new DMs.
Open it.
He insisted. Inside were 2 pieces of broken chicken bone and some dust. Holding up the leftovers, I said, Ugh, you shouldn't have, with the sort of accuracy that would make my old maths teacher weep. He leant over and blew on the bones. Unless he'd been eating ancient death lately, some of that old dust got up my nose and in my eyes, because the room looked murky and out of focus all of a sudden. Gross! I mumbled as everything turned blacker than my eyeliner. My hearing was my last sense to linger, because I heard the couch sag as he relaxed back into the cushions, and I'm sure I heard him say,
You're welcome.
Before taking a nap became something of a necessity for me. I was wrong about my senses, though, because I felt myself hit the floor before I passed out.
Well, I didn't see that coming. Well, I suppose I did, because I was in it. Let's see what happens in Chapter 3.
I woke up to the sound of somebody blubbing in the dark, and because I'm English through and through, I resolved to put a stop to it before it caught on. The problem I found was it was still pitch black, and when I tried to move, I discovered I was in a wooden box, scarcely bigger than I was. No! No! Impossible! It was wooden, but who'd not buried? Why? I was alive, wasn't I? The last thing. The bones! I'd smelt death, but not a Oh, the Professor! Was the weeping another trapped deserted soul like me? Doomed, buried alive in a coffin? No! I was a resourceful girl. I would not take this lying down. I didn't feel like I was. I pounded on the lid and screamed, Let me out! With all I had. I was certainly loud enough and high-pitched enough to leave Cerberus whimpering in the corner, along with my fellow prisoner if we were dead.
Good grief.
A distorted but oddly familiar voice cursed.
What's all that racket about?
Sudden light burst over my senses. I squinted and blinked, and the Professor came into focus. I took a wild swing at him, but my limbs were cramped by my confinement, and I missed. My verbal attack was more accurate. That was a rotten trick, you putrid troll!
Do I know you?
He escaped my second attempt to repay him for his prank, and I began to notice my surroundings. I had not been buried alive or even in a coffin, but in a pantry that was otherwise empty. I had stepped out of that into a kitchen, crude, ancient and mostly empty, but obviously a kitchen. The Professor looked different too, younger maybe, or perhaps it was just his hair or the 4 o'clock shadow. He was leaner, and he'd been fast enough to dodge when I'd swung for him, and smart enough as well, which was something new. Professor Lovecraft? I asked, so unsure. Ha! He wishes, a second voice said, and I realised that I'd overlooked the room's other occupant. Literally looked over his head because he was barely 3 foot tall and shorter than the kitchen counter between us. He's the boss boy. Get to it, Lovecraft.
Yes, chef.
The chef offered a hairy hand, and as I shook it, he introduced himself as Aldron Gullbelcher, finest chef in the 12 kingdoms. All 12? Impressive. Not really. All the other chefs are dead. I followed him out of the kitchen, saying, well, it's still kind of impressive. Wait, what? They're all dead? How? Trolls, he said, and he pointed at a horizon stained red by a bloody and blossoming fire and the charred skeletal remains of a devastated city. Between us and that terrifying slaughter was a crude wooden palisade and a handful of tired and worn soldiers picking at the dust around them. They looked like men who had been broken over and over again, men who knew the end was close. Man, Aldron called. Who prayed for the stripper? All 5 of them raised their hands. Well, you should have asked for cannons, he admonished them. Behind us atop the motte was a keep in some disrepair. He led me up the slope, and because I was still insisting that I wasn't a stripper, I was quite out of breath when we reached the top. It was a joke, Missy. Riley. I think I'll stick with Missy. There's no point learning the name of somebody who'll be dead tomorrow. I guess not. Wait, what? I'm going to be dead tomorrow? Don't take it personally. We all will. He pointed at the fires. The trolls will come for us once they're done with their barbecue. This is the last outpost of man, he added solemnly. Behind us was a range of mountains. I pointed. Can't we run and hide in them? Missy, I admire your spirit, but why do you think there are so few of us? I had that momentary clench of being unprepared for a surprise quiz, but luckily he carried on. We're here to guard their path, but it's hardly worth it. Even trolls aren't stupid enough to try and walk through a dragon's nest. No, tomorrow they'll come for us and all my brave boys will be dead. And we're out of supplies, so I can't even cook them the supper they deserve. He began to blub again, and my immediate instinct was to comfort him, but I had to hug him at an angle so he wouldn't cry wet patches onto my skirt. Hasn't anybody tried to get through the pass? I asked. Lots, but they only came back as smoke signals, not even enough to cook up some bacon, if we had any. With the brave little man crying into my pocket, looking down on his lost and dispirited troop, I resolved to try the pass myself, to heroically save us all, but especially me.
Golly, I do love it when she gets heroic. Here's chapter 4.
Unable to leave the student life behind, despite my new surroundings, I headed out of the camp first thing, just before lunch, which would either be nothing or them depending on how quick trolls moved with their stomachs full of townsfolk. The mountain range wasn't far from the fort, and I could see the dark entrance to the pass before I left the bailey. Wait! Chef Gullbelcher called, and he and the professor's doppelganger caught up. The boys want you to take Sexton. Why? We're sick of the sight of him, and we have no food, so not much call for a dishwasher. Are you any good with a sword? I asked him.
Oh, yes,
he replied.
If you've got any bubbles, I'll get it nice and shiny.
I looked at Gullbelcher, who shook his head. I'll go on my own. If the way is clear, I'll be back in a jiffy. If not, send an ashtray for my remains. They watched me walk away so intensely that I twice checked my heels to see if I was dragging toilet paper. I've never seen a mountain up close before. Tall, aren't they? These ones were wide too, and as I got closer, I could see less and less of anything else. When I turned back, the soldiers and Gullbelcher were just 6 small specks, and an even smaller one. Near the cave opening, details of the rocky frame became discernible, yet its heart seemed to get only blacker. A tangible darkness lurked there, hiding even the barest hints of detail. Here too I noticed that the silence was a consumption of sound, as if the monsters hidden in that bleak nothing could prey on noise itself. I was acutely aware that the scuffing of my boots on the sharp rocks was echoed by the pattering fall of stone fragments. Whatever fell creatures lived in this wicked place, they had their cruel eyes on my every move. Perhaps I should have taken a sword, but doing so would have left one of the others unarmed, and anything not made of asbestos would be next to useless if I met a dragon. For any other creatures waiting in ambush, I'd rely on my steel-toe caps or good old-fashioned running away. I had a moment of hesitation at the threshold of the path, listening to the mountain's whispered secrets weeping in the shadows and the haunting sounds of scratching and clawing that answered. I had nothing much to lose, a sad reflection of my 18 years on the planet. Or planets, I guess. I plunged forward into the gloom. The rocky cave floor sloped downward. A few scant feet in front of me, the darkness was near total. I stumbled, scraped and scratched my way deeper into the heart, the bowels of the mountain range. My hands held in front of me like the blind feeling their way. Always deeper, hotter, closer and closer, until the surroundings hissed, susurrated with a life of their own, and the still air carried the weight and stench of its own foul breath. The walls were, I noticed, home to countless passages that led away. I could not be sure how far they went, or even to where, only that the walls closed and retreated with my steps in a way that could only be the unnatural product of a legion of monstrous workers, or one giant monster. Rockfalls and wild stalagmites had blocked the path and lined the floor, walls and ceiling with sharp scraping and snagging edges. I was rapidly covered in bruises and cuts. With each thick step down, I felt the weight of both the mountain and my mission turn my trek to a trudge. And always the smell of sulphur, of rot, of death reached for me, clung to me. What a fool I'd been to take on this mission. I was a physics student. I laughed at the Nordic Walking Society when their poles stuck in the uni's mud, and the only fantasy book I'd read was Fungus the Bogeyman, and I can't even say for sure that counted. I even fell asleep watching How to Train Your Dragon, which was a pity because it might come in useful. Eventually the air became oppressive, heated my hair, streaked my makeup, and perspiration pooled in the small of my back, the bottom of my boots. More and more I realised the stalagmites were, in fact, fissures that burst plumes of stench-laden steam from the mountain's molten core into the tunnel. The cloying heat wrung through my clothes, dripped onto my skin. Puddles abounded, boiling my sodden leggings until my steps were heavy from blistering, constricting cloth. The heat clung to my chest, sat on my shoulders, pushing me down into the sweltering haze at my ankles. The walls, warm and sticky to my groping fingers, closed around me. Stumbling from side to side became redundant. They pressed around me like the scaly hide of a snake, so close that I could touch both at once, then without stretching, now whether I chose to or not, turning me sideways if I wished to move at all. Whenever I tried to gasp for breath into my constricted lungs, sharp edges bit flesh, ripped fabric. And still tighter, still closer, grinding against the scouring rock. With every inch I dragged myself, I began to fear, looking behind me. Could I retreat? Could I be stuck forever between the pincers of the mountain? I heard a voice, lilting and cruel, as wicked and ancient as the stone itself. It said, "You didn't think you could sneak in here without me knowing, did you?" And the darkness was lit by a burst of flame. I'd found the dragon.
Things are definitely hotting up now. Did you see what I did there? Here's chapter 5.
My heart bounced around in my throat, choking off a high-pitched squeal. And I scrambled back the way I'd come, my knees and elbows dragging me through the serrated passage. My hands and feet floundered and stumbled in a ragged haste. A thump, heavy enough to rattle the very mountain, rained sharp pebbles down on me. The narrow tunnel filled rapidly, blocked. I had no choice. I scrambled to the end, scorched and heated still, and I tripped, waded, and fell at the edge of an enormous cavern. Beneath me the mountains had been hollowed out into a vast honeycomb of rock columns propping up crisscrossing walkways. The cavern was an enormous jagged bowl, the edges cut away in a series of narrow ridges, tall enough to be the giant stairs, but not much wider than my feet. Far below, the bottom was lost in the hazy glow of a seam of gold or fresh lava, but dizzied by the height, I couldn't tell which. I ducked down behind chipped and fragmented rock, searching for the dragon. Its presence, the aura of fire and power, filled that space, squeezing me tight into a frightened ball. I could not see it. Keeping to the wall, I sneaked along the ledge as well as my wobbling knees might permit. I had to find another passage. I had to get back to the others. I'd rather fight trolls with a toothpick than end up on a dragon's. "Going so soon?" The dragon's voice echoed at me from every direction, the sound vibrating loose a tumble of dust and stone. "You haven't even got what you came for." I heard movement above me, and I hit the deck without any certainty I'd done so by design. "Come down." I heard it say. "Help yourself to gold. You can have all the gold you can carry out alive." The vile thing laughed, a sadist, cruel snigger. I wound my way around the ledge, looking for a way out or down. What I found instead was a golden goblet, bold and bright as brass, in the middle of the path. The monster was toying with me. I left it alone and retreated the way I'd come, stopping as I stepped precariously out onto the top of the honeycomb, a crude walkway wobbling beneath me. "The others were more fun," the dragon, if dragons are capable of such things, pouted. I scurried down to a lower ridge, searching for an escape route. "I don't want your stupid gold!" I shouted out into the cavern. I only wanted to go back, but the rock walls yielded nothing. "The others wanted the gold," the dragon sing-songed back. "But they also wanted to live, and they didn't get that either." To my right, I saw a recess deeper than the others. I willed it to be a cave, a way out, and inched towards it. I was a foot away when a roaring gout of flame sent me spinning, batting out patches of fire smouldering on my clothes. I felt the vibration of a scaled hide scouring the rock face, joddering through my boots. With a jerk, I was falling, surrounded by stones. Ripping the flesh of my hands, I tried to stop my slide down the precipice. I slewed to a halt, grabbing at an upright rock column. The horizontal beam it supported had fallen and disappeared into the depths. I lowered myself to another ledge, breathing heavily, clinging to the column. I hunted left and right for a cave or passage, any method of egress from the room, if not from the mountains. "Peekaboo!" The scaled, vicious face of the dragon, razored fangs, yellowed eyes, and a glowing, smouldering nose lunged close, inches away. I was falling, flailing, clutching out, until with a whoomph my back found rock again. That rock stole my breath and scattered my belongings out of my pockets. I lay paralysed, gasping impotent, airless breaths at the ceiling. The swishing, bifurcated tail of the dragon slithered through rocks above me and was gone. I gathered some oxygen, then a little more, and rattled breath from my battered body. Unconsciously, as I waited for the strength to stand, I began gathering my things. Much of it was broken, including my bottle of candy, but it was a reflex action, and I could do little else until I recovered enough to slump against the granite upright. Enormous jaws snapped at me, scored the column. My arm went up in a futile defence. With a flash, the dragon reeled back a flame. The hand I'd swung had contained my perfume. It was broken and now empty, but it had brought a moment no more. The dragon was moving around me and I could see no way up or down. I was quite stuck. Without the pillar, who knew how far down I'd slide? "That was very mean," the dragon chided. I was tired of the game. A single morass of cuts and bruises. I snapped back. "Maybe, but you can't deny you smell better now." There was a silence, parted only by the frantic booming of my heart. "It smells like honey." "It's Candy by Britney Spears," I said. "I got it at the market, but it's legit." "She must be a fierce warrior to sell her scent like that," the dragon mused as I searched for it. "Totally. What's this thing?" A scaled hand appeared from above. In the claws, looking ridiculously delicate, was my most glamorous, glorious possession, my pink Lancome lipstick. "My lippy! Check this out!" The top came off with a pop that rang out like David's favourite chord and echoed in that cavern like the prescience of a second Big Bang, harmonising with the vibration of a rock honeycomb that had become an artisan's heart plucked by the graceful hands of angels. The mountain itself turned to the joy of the radiant song, and the outside birds chirped their own rendition and then lamented the profanity of their imitation. And it was pink. "It's beautiful," the dragon said. She was suitably awestruck. "Can I have it?" "No, but I have a red one," and I offered it to her. "Nice. What do you use it for?" Mostly you put it on your around your mouth." I hoped she wouldn't take any offence. She had a considerable weight and fire advantage if we came to blows. "Hot. I'll look like I just devoured a cow or something." She hastily amended her own slip. "Do you like cow?" I like steak." Well done." "I don't even mind if it's a bit burnt and crumbles like charcoal." "Oh, I love it when it's charcoal. What can I trade for the red one?" "Keep it. It's cool." "That's so sweet. Thanks." "Wait." I remembered why. I was there just in time, I hoped. "I need to trade it for you to let me and my friends through the mountain." "Why do you want to go to the troll land?"
The what? The troll land. The hills at the side are full of their little villages and whatnot. Oh, who'd have thought that stuck in the middle of a mountain I'd find myself between a rock and a hard place? She was fumbling with the lipstick, smearing it all across her face like a 6-year-old preparing for the future prom or to battle Batman. I offered to help and applied a nice smooth coat to the outside of her mouth, saying, "You'll be the hottest dragon in the kingdom." "Do you think I could get a date with..." "No." "With who?" "Dave. Just a guy I know." "Are you going out?" She shook her head, suddenly shy. "Call him up," I insisted. "Are you sure?" "Of course. What do you have to lose?" "Okay," she said, with a newfound confidence. She puffed a precise string of smoke signals up towards the roof. 3, pause, 1, another pause, 2. "And don't be nervous. You're beautiful." "Am I?" "Yes. Look." I pulled out my compact. The mirror was cracked, but we duck-faced into it, and she turned to stone.
Golly, that was exciting, wasn't it? Let's see how it ends in Chapter 6.
It took me a couple of hours to find the path that led back to the fort. I could have been quicker, but I'd found a cache of dragon eggs and didn't want to go back empty-handed. Things at the fort were much changed. The city on the horizon was merely smouldering ashes, the smoke mingling with the approaching dust cloud that marked the troll's progress. The rude wickedness of the troll weaponry was clearly visible, stabbing at the sky, rumbling and rattling out of the fog. Grim, misshapen creatures lumbered towards us, distant, but inevitably closer. Behind them, the sun fell against the horizon. The soldiers turned to face me as I trudged through the palisade. "Is that a dragon's egg?" I couldn't see who'd asked over the dragon's egg. "It's breakfast," I said. "What if it hatches?" "That's not how eggs work," Goodbelcher told him. "It's not fertilised, right?" I shook my head, and Goodbelcher insisted Sexton relieve me of my cargo while the others set a fire. "I hope you like omelets, lads." The raucous cheer suggested they did. Tired, I sat and listened to them chatting as they busied themselves with their tasks. They worked well together, quickly coaxing smoke, and then a blaze from the kindling, and occasionally offered chirpy comments my way. "You know, we prayed for food, women and saving from the trolls. 2 out of 3 isn't bad. When's she gonna deliver the third?" Goodbelcher's omelette would put his surname to his men, but their morale was very different to when I arrived. They swapped jokes and stories about battles and friends, now melancholy, then heroic, then ribald. Between the food, company, and clear evening, it was easy to unwind, relax, and forget our troubles. Inevitably, the conversation moved on to their wives, girlfriends, and lovers. The professor fell quiet. "Professor?" I asked, out of habit. "Don't you have a girlfriend?" "Why do you think he prayed for a woman?" someone shouted. "Maybe you could help with that," a second voice suggested. Suddenly, the only one not looking my way was Sexton, who focused his attention on the stars. "He didn't pray hard enough for that," I said as gently as I could. "Story of his life. Not hard enough," a wag shouted. Things got a bit juvenile. Knowing that I could not win even in a metaphorical dick-measuring contest, I sat with Sexton and asked, "What are you looking at up there?" I don't know much about space, but he pointed around the sky and said the things he was indicating were stars or constellations or something. Sagittarius, Scorpius, Antares, and a dragon. It circled the camp and we tracked it by the stars blinking out behind it. Sober reality returned and we watched in silence. I walked to the fire and used my jacket to control the smoke. It was hard to see, but maybe dragons have better night vision. Certainly it came down circling lower so that we could hear the beat of its wings. The others scrambled for their weapons. "Wait!" I pleaded, and I signalled again. The dragon settled easily, looking at me across the fire.
"How did you get that signal?"
"The other dragon gave it to me."
"Esther? Why would she do that? Is she okay?"
"Well," I mumbled, "she got turned to stone." God bless the passive voice. His anger growled and sparked in his throat.
"If the trolls did it, I'll roast them alive. Did they?"
All around the camp, I saw worried faces nodding eagerly. "Well, I sighed deep inside. Sometimes I hate doing the right thing. It was, me. It was an accident." I rummaged my compact out of my pocket. "I just showed her the mirror."
"Don't point that thing at me."
"Oh, sorry." I closed it up.
"Was the glass cracked?"
he asked. For 2 tons of fiery teeth and scales, he was very reasonable. I nodded.
"Well, you weren't to know. And if she's only stone dead, it's easily fixed. I'd better go see."
And with that, he was flying towards the mountains. "Why didn't you say it was the trolls?" the majority of the company demanded, in a quite effective chorus. I stuttered and mumbled, trying to find some articulacy. Someone else got there first. Sexton. He said,
"It wouldn't be right."
Goodbelcher nodded slowly. "Less suicidal, but not right. And after this lot of trolls would only be the next." Their voices bounced around in the dark. "Let's just give them a bloody nose. Maybe there'll be some omelette left. There'll be plenty once you're dead." They went on like that, but even in the dark we could see and hear the trolls approach. Rocks don't make good wheels, not without a lot of skilled work, and trolls have either no taste for it or no aptitude for it. The army heaving up at our gates was on the rough side. The wheels of the first tank bulldozer lurched as much from side to side as it did forward. One troll was thrown from the saddle, but a rattly, cackling replacement was eagerly found, and the lurching was responsible for the flailing of the dozer's blades and chains, and blades on the end of chains. It ground towards our tiny and fragile-looking defence. Swarming around these machines, their infantry was an animal and grotesque movement of dust and frenzied chords of bloodlust. They would be with us in minutes. "At least we'll die with a full belly," Goodbelcher offered. "I hope mines stick in their throat," someone replied. Goodbelcher led me away from the others. "The boys have been talking," he told me. "They think it would be bad for morale to see you die. So perhaps it'd be better if you hung back."
What about my morale? If I sit around doing nothing, well, everyone else dies.
He offered no argument. "Well, should you survive, I want you to have this." He pressed a leather pouch into my palm. "It's the combined knowledge of the gustatory bastions, the one true understanding of St. Sebastian's 21 flavour profiles. Knowledge like that should not be lost to mankind." "I'll guard it with my life, obviously," he said, and I suppose he had a point. "One thing, though. You mustn't look at it unless you're qualified chef." "I won't." "Promise?" "Of course." What sort of girl did he think I was? Satisfied, he turned back to the barricade. "Hey, Goodbelcher." "Yes, missy?" "It's just a couple of little bones and some dust." "Sue me." "I must have given you the wrong one," he said, coming back. "Here." I offered the bones and he reached out for them as he neared, but the sneaky little swine puffed on them instead. He was grinning about it even as the trolls crashed through the palisade and the world faded out. I blinked Professor Lovecraft into focus. "Professor?" I asked, dazed and confused. "I think I ate a bad egg or something. I saw you and some soldiers fighting trolls."
Herbs or pills?
He answered thoughtfully. "Neither. I'm clean." His eyebrow was more cocked than a battery of hems. "I'm poor," I admitted. "What happened to them?" I asked. "Goodbelcher and the others."
I've no idea what you're talking about. I made that up to stop you glaring at me.
He looked at his watch.
Shouldn't you get to class? And don't forget my breakfast tomorrow. Extra
eggs, I finished for him as I headed for the door.
Thanks, Missy.